Hello, my name is Christopher Ado, and I am going to show you a quick walkthrough of the mCloud interface. When we start, we can log in as the administrator, and the first thing we'll see is the monitoring tab, which gives you an at-a-glance view of the health of all the projects that are running within an environment. And in this context, a project is a logical grouping of virtual machines. So in this one, we see that there's one healthy project and one project with a warning. Let's take a look at that warning and see what it's showing us first. If we double-click, it'll show us the number of virtual machines that are in that project and the health of each VM. And we see this one VM is listed as status suspended. So it's showing us a warning status, meaning there's nothing specifically wrong with it, but it's not running. So if we were expecting all the VMs to be running, we'd know to take a look at that one. If we go back into the other project with two running VMs, we see there's both green. If we double click on this one, it will show us some status information, so we can get a graph of the CPU, network, and block I/O usage, as well as the private IP, the current status, and we can take a few actions on this VM. For instance, from here, we can reboot it, pause, suspend it, or click on VNC console to start a VNC console connection to that VM. If we go down to the Projects tab, we'll see the projects that are running currently in this environment. If you double-click on any project, it will show you some information on the Instances and Volumes tab, which includes the instances that are running and any volumes that have been provisioned. We can look at the Access and Security tab. This will show us floating IPs that have been allocated and the security groups that have been defined for this environment. A security group is essentially a firewall definition. So, for instance, we can look at the default security group. For this environment, or for this demo project, it's been set up with a few specific ports open. So there's ICMP and 3 TCP ports that are open for inbound traffic on the virtual machines. If we look at the Snapshots tab, if there were any snapshots of VMs, they would show up here, and we can also see that there are a few snapshots of volumes already listed here. If we click on the Collaborators tab, this will show us anyone who has been invited to work with us on this environment. So if, for instance, in an organization you wanted to invite a colleague to work on virtual machines with you within a specific project, you could click New Collaborator and enter their email address here or create a new user for them here. Let's go back to the Instances and Volumes tab and launch a new instance. If you have an environment with lots of instances, for instance, you've been taking snapshots of different variations of specific instances, this list could get really long, and you can narrow it down with the search bar. So let's launch a 64-bit Ubuntu 12 instance. We'll call it SRV2. Here we can choose the size of the VMs, so we can make them get more cores and more RAM for these virtual machines as needed. We can also launch multiple copies of this instance if we wanted to. Here we'll choose which key pair to associate with the instance, and this is a regular SSH public key. And the security group. If we had multiple security groups defined for this project, we would select those here. Finally, we can set a specific root password to use for this particular instance. If we don't choose one, a random password will be generated upon launch. And that random password generated shows up on the next pane here. If we close this, we'll see that the instance is now spawning, and in about 8 to 10 seconds it should be listed as active. And here we go. The instance is now running. If we go to the Access and Security tab, we can allocate a new floating IP address and associate it with this particular instance. Whenever you allocate a floating IP address, it stays with the project whether or not it's associated to an instance. So if you were to point a DNS entry at one of these public IP addresses that you have allocated for the project, you can selectively associate and disassociate that public IP address with any specific virtual machine. So if you wanted to replace a running VM with a new one later on and not have to update your DNS, you could just disassociate the IP address and reassociate to the new one. So if we grab that IP address, we should be able to SSH to it. And we see it's asked us to accept the new key because we've never connected to this VM before. And here we are connected to the new VM that we just launched. Let's watch syslog while we go back to the Instances and Volumes tab and create a new volume, and we'll attach the new volume. This is dynamically creating a block storage device, which will then be connected to the virtual machine via iSCSI. So we can create a new volume of basically any size we want. Let's make this one 20 gigs. We'll click Create. This process takes just 2 or 3 seconds. And once it's been created, we can click Attach, choose which instance we want to attach it to, and click Attach. And when we do this, we'll jump back to the syslog and watch the syslog on this virtual machine. Now within about a few seconds, we'll see that it's been connected using the virtual I/O driver, and we see down here that there's a new device at VDC with an unknown partition table. Let's partition that, and then we can format it and use that volume. So there we go. It took just under 25 seconds or 30 seconds to allocate, partition, and format a 20 gig volume and get it connected to our VM so we can do whatever we want with it. If we go back to the interface, we could easily take a snapshot of this VM if we wanted to, and then that snapshot can be cloned and attached to another VM later on. The same thing goes for virtual machines. Any virtual machine that's running, we can take several actions against it. We can reboot it, pause it, suspend it, resize it. When you resize a VM, you can allocate more cores or more RAM to it. And you can also take a snapshot, delete the VM, look at the logs. If, for instance, you had trouble booting a VM, you could take a look at the logs and see what was going on when that VM first started up. It usually takes the interface a few seconds to retrieve the log from the VM. And here we can see whether or not there were any problems specifically with launching the VM. For instance, if there were networking issues or anything else, we would see those here. One other thing we can do from here is attach to a VNC console. If, for instance, we did not want to connect a public IP address to this virtual machine, we could work on it through the VNC console. Within the environment, we can see the Users tab, and as an administrator, this is where we could go to create a new user, and we can allocate or connect that user to a specific project and give them a role as either a member or a project manager. As a member, they can only see the project that they're attached to, and they cannot create any new users. As a project manager, they can invite new users to that same project. We can look at the Usage tab and select a specific project and a date range, and it will show us the virtual machines that have been running there and how long they've been running. And that's about it. Thanks for your time.